Hi, Eric.
Hey, Aaron, how are you doing?
Good. Season finale.
Season finale.
Yep.
Little belated, but it's here.
A couple months late, but hey, that's what, when you have a bunch of theme times and stuff going on, that's what happens.
And such. Yeah, it's summer. People travel.
But we're going to count this as the end of our season 6.
Yes. It is not the first time that we've planned to have a final episode and not gotten around to it, but this time we stopped not getting around to it and we're going to do it.
We're actually going to do it.
Yeah.
Because we've been planning this one for a few months.
We've been planning is a strong word.
Okay,
Aaron.
we set the idea in place.
Yes, we had the idea for this.
So how should we get started? Should we tie it to our first season episode?
This is a bookend episode.
This is the bookend.
Yeah, we started, the first episode of the season was talking about Barbie.
Yeah.
And my theory that it's an endowment film.
Yeah.
And so we're going to end the season talking about movies.
We're going to just talk about movies some more. And what we've done is we've decided to look for movies with, well, the way I interpreted the assignment, and you might have interpreted it differently.
Let's find out.
All right. I interpreted the assignment as find movies with distinctly LDS themes.
Or at least themes that we are interpreting as distinctly LDS.
Yeah. So they certainly, well, not certainly, maybe someone LDS snuck these in there somewhere. But movies where if you could do an LDS reading, right?
Yes.
Kind of like how we did the Good Place episode. I remember...
the Good Place episode.
Yeah.
The Barbie episode. Our friends at... Have you ever listened to Pop Culture on the Apricot Tree?
I really want to.
Yeah, it's good. My friend Liz is one of the co-hosts, and that's kind of all they do. Congratulations to them, by the way. They won an AML award for Best Podcast last week.
Yeah, that's great.
Good for them.
Hey. So... How do you want to do it? We've each picked three.
Well, I think we should start by talking about sort of the tradition here, because I am going to guess, I would give, if I were the odds makers, it'd be real close to 1-to-1, that at some point in your youth, someone compared the Force to the priesthood in a Sunday school class.
So I actually have a list of movies that I want to give as counterexamples before we got started.
Okay, jump in.
And I think Star Wars was one of them.
What do you mean by counterexample?
Okay, so Star Wars definitely has a religious tone to it.
Certainly.
But I would argue it's not LDS.
Go on.
It's Catholic.
Okay. Go on.
So
yeah, I'm seeing this. Go on.
Yeah. So in fact, if you listen to Yoda, he describes the Force as an entity that surrounds us and binds us all together and is is within us, right? And but that's very similar to how I've heard people Catholicism's God described.
Okay.
Which Christian gods we're all we're all very similar to each other.
Yeah, but not identical.
Large enough to fill the universe, but small enough to fit in your heart.
So you're interpreting Star Wars as the Force as a metaphor for God. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and then the LDS interpretation would be more like. Priesthood authority, for example.
Yeah, that's how I heard it the most times, I think.
But you see my point? My point is that George Lucas, I believe, was a Catholic.
Oh, I have no idea what his religious background is.
Should we Google it, or should we...
I'm going to find out right now.
All right.
What religion is George Lucas? Well, according to Celeb Answers, which is definitely a reliable source.
Top pick.
That I use all the time.
Yeah.
He himself has summed up that his denomination is Methodist Buddhist.
Ah, fantastic. This is why it's important to do your fact checking.
Yeah. His parents were Methodist and he was raised Methodist.
Yeah. So, okay, so I would give it as a counterexample because I don't I see where
you don't see
come
this particularly the Latter-day Saint interpretation is less compelling.
Yeah, compared to just a general religious interpretation, which I do think is interesting. Right? But it's not, to me, it doesn't seem LDS. I have another example.
Okay.
One of my favorite movies of all time, Contact.
Oh, that's a great movie.
Oh, by the way.
That was, I can say this because it's not ruining it. Do you play Framed?
Well, this is what I was going to say is this episode is going to be full of spoilers.
But yeah, we should mention that. Including that today the answer on Framed was Contact.
Oh, there
Contact
you go.
was the movie today. So.
Okay, so in Contact, right, that movie is about faith.
Yes, at least in part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So faith in something unseen that is true, right?
Yeah.
Where she comes back from the voyage and says, I saw this, I had this experience and nobody believes her, or at least she thinks nobody believes her, but it turns out everybody believes her. And her companion throughout the movie was a priest, right? Who they talk about science and atheism and Occam's razor and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's very good for a religious...
It's like a podcast episode.
Yeah, it's very good for a religious theme, but it ain't necessarily LDS.
Okay.
To me, it's good, it's nice, it's faith-driven, but I'm looking for something that I can pin an LDS hat on. Okay.
I would say... So I brought 2, maybe 3 movies to talk about today.
Yeah.
I think one of them will qualify. Two of them, the 1.5 would qualify.
1.5 will qualify.
Yeah.
All right. Well, how should we do it? Do you want me to go first?
Well, we've already established your framework, so let's start with you.
Okay.
How many movies did you bring to talk about?
I brought 3.
Okay.
And they're all animated.
Oh, one of mine is animated, so that's great. I'm pro animation.
I want to actually start with... I can go least compelling to most compelling.
Compellingly LDS?
Yeah.
Well, we should probably save the big one for last.
All right. I think my most least compelling but fun to talk about LDS-themed movie is 1990s Disney animated movie.
90 would be Beauty and the Beast.
Beauty and the Beast, that's good. It's not
it.
Go later. It is 1990s, I should have said.
Oh, 1990s. Okay. Yep. Well, after Beauty and the Beast, I think Lion King's next.
Yeah.
And then Aladdin.
Yep.
And then...
Might go the other order.
Go all the way to Pocahontas?
Pocahontas is after that.
And then Tarzan, maybe?
Yeah.
Oh, is it Hunchback?
It's not Hunchback.
Oh, I love Hunchback.
But Hunchback is a fun one.
Hunchback's a great one.
Hercules.
Hercules. Oh, yeah, I don't like that one.
So why don't you like Hercules?
I just think it's dumb.
Okay, I think it's hilarious.
Yeah, I guess the jokes don't work on me.
Okay, so I worked with some sister missionaries on my mission.
Yeah.
And one of their lessons that they like to use on occasion, if a member or if an investigator was taking longer than the normal amount of time to go through the discussions, and they had a discussion where they didn't have one of the normal discussion slots, they would put in Hercules as their discussion.
Wow.
Yeah. And the reason is because of there's this one absolutely critical moment in the movie, which is LDS.
Well, I don't know what that is, but I will mention that the last time I saw Hercules was at girls' camp. So,
how long was?
Gosh, when was I? I think that was before I was in the bishopric, so that's probably been a while ago. But,
okay.
But yeah, it was just for fun though.
Okay.
There were, as far as I can recall, there was
no attempt to ring a religious tone.
Yeah, not that I can recall.
Do you remember the look on Hercules' face in the Temple of Zeus near the beginning of the movie? When Zeus comes down and inhabits a statue, right? And he says, "Didn't know you have a famous father," essentially. And
I know that scene existed. Details I'm not going to know.
Well, what he says is,
I don't understand. If you're my father, that would make me a god. A god. A god.
It's it's a momentous moment, and then he spends the rest of the movie as he learns that he's a child of God, and that essentially he has this divine potential.
Okay.
Right, and he strives the rest of the movie to live up to that divine potential, and the theme is, if you know who you are and where you've come from and where you're going, right, then it gives you a motivation and a purpose to kind of drive your life in such a way that you can return to live with God. Because that was his whole goal for the entire movie.
This is a works-centric
Oh, yeah, very
theology.
Works-centric theology. Exactly. And in fact, he eventually has to prove himself a true hero, right? Which he does by sacrificing himself to save Megara, one of the princesses who is consistently screwed over by Disney because she ain't a princess. She doesn't have that official brand. Did you know that there are some requirements to be a princess in Disney?
I did know that. I read about that before, but I can't remember what they are, and I know that somehow Belle qualifies. Belle
qualifies, yep. It has to do with like talking animal companion or,
You have to have a talking animal companion to qualify?
Well, kind of,
That's one of the rules. That's interesting.
I don't want to Google it. Okay, so they have to have a central role. They have to be royal by birth or marriage, or do a heroic deed, as is in the case with Mulan. They must be human or human-looking.
Okay.
So Ariel from Little Mermaid
So
counts,
Maid Marian does not count.
right? And then there are others that are not considered official, like the animal sidekick and stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. So for some reason,
it's not central enough.
It's like a lot of people don't qualify. So Jane from Tarzan, Esmeralda from Hunchback, and Tinkerbell, none of them qualify, right?
But the princess from Hercules, is that the main female character?
Megara,
yep,
and she's listed as popular, but without a title. Meg.
Oh, Meg, that's right. That's how I know her.
Yep.
But it says in the text of the movie that she is a princess?
She is not, and so she doesn't qualify.
Okay, gotcha. Yep.
So she doesn't get the royal treatment at Disneyland.
Interesting.
Okay, but you see do you see the LDS theme here, where it's about
Godhead?
Yes,
but let me ask you this. Yeah. So Star Wars, too Catholic. Mm-hmm. What was the other example you gave?
Contact.
Too generically faithful. Why is this one not too Greek?
To me, it's divinization.
But I mean, Hercules goes through a similar path in Greek mythology.
That's true. But that's okay.
Okay.
I suppose uniquely LDS maybe is the wrong label for this.
Okay.
Right? Because you're right. There are other religions that deal with divinization. As we talked about when we discussed that word, that includes Eastern Orthodox in some ways, right?
Yeah, I remember us talking about that, but I am not prepared to restate what we learned.
We can link back to that episode.
Yeah.
Right. Now, but I started this by saying it had the least association because it kind of, in my opinion, the ending of Hercules breaks enough of these rules that I think it kind of deviates from the course.
Okay.
He gives up his godhood at the end to stay with Megara. Mm-hmm. And it's, I've always thought from an LDS perspective that it's a bummer of an ending.
Yeah.
Right? It buys into this class divide between the gods and the mortals. That we as LDS people, that's one of our fundamental tenets. Is that God once was, as man is, God once was.
Lord of the Rings, the elf gives up her immortality. Arwen,
yeah,
to be with Strider. Aragorn. Wow, I'm not remembering what his name's. Been too long since I've watched those movies. Which is always true because they're always good.
They're always good.
But a movie I haven't seen, City of Angels, which was really big shortly after my mission. It's the same thing. Like this idea of divine creatures giving it up for love, which I suppose, that's a romantic. I mean, I just rewatched an old episode of Seinfeld where Elaine's boss purchases the cake that was at the wedding of the fellow who gave up his royalty to marry the American divorcee.
Yeah.
Like that was, and everybody and Elaine is like, it's such a romantic cake, right? And then she eats it, but but yeah, there is something
because
about
they're terrible and they go to jail.
Giving up what's better, like giving up royalty or divinity in order for love is like a heroic sort of sacrifice.
It is, but it's baked into that is the assumption
that's the only direction.
That's the only direction that mortals can never be.
Yes,
as our Heavenly Father is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which I think is uniquely LDS.
So you would say that to keep it royal for a second, the marriage of Prince William and Kate Middleton is a very LDS marriage because she has aspired to divinity and achieved it.
Whereas Meghan Markle and Prince Harry gave it up.
More of a Hercules story. And that is the most we've talked about the British royals ever on this podcast. And it's probably a record that will go unbroken for a long, long time.
But there you go. I always liked Hercules because of the once you know who you are, you strive to return to live with your Heavenly Father.
No atonement in this movie.
Other than, there's no redemption.
No redemption.
Yeah, except for maybe Phil. Phil gets redemption.
Okay.
Yeah. But Hercules doesn't get redemption. He never was bad to begin with.
Yeah.
Hades has no redemption. Mm-hmm. Right? You could argue Meg has redemption.
Okay.
She has a redemptive arc where she betrays Hercules.
But it doesn't turn her into a god.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I love the narrative theme of redemption in movies as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, not necessarily LDS, but certainly part of our religion.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's my first one. Should we go back and forth?
Nice. Yeah, unless you feel like your next one is a perfect segue.
Nah, not necessarily.
So my first one is a movie we've talked about briefly on the podcast before, and I'm not planning to talk about it a lot today. But it's The Tree of Life, the Terrence Malick movie from a little over a decade ago.
So I have seen it.
Oh, you have? Yeah. What did you think?
So it's been a long time since I've seen it.
It's a hard movie to hold in your brain.
And one thing that we decided to do for this episode is not tell each other our movies.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. Which means that if you've picked movies I haven't seen before, then I'm just tough out of luck and you'll just have to describe them to me. Right? And vice versa. Though I'm positive you've seen all mine.
I honestly don't know if you've seen mine, so it'll be interesting to find out.
Well, it's been long enough that I've forgotten most about the Tree of Life. Now, isn't it, let me see if I can remember it.
Okay.
It's about the Fountain of Youth as a theme.
No.
Okay, then which one am I thinking of?
Are you thinking of The Fountain?
Yeah, I'm thinking of The Fountain.
That's a different writer-director. Anyway, The Tree of Life, the reason I wanted to bring it and the reason I didn't want to talk about it a whole lot is because I think it's an interesting counterpoint to Barbie, and that I think it's also an endowment movie in that it's about eternity and the direction of the soul and what things mean and how we're tied to each other. It's about all those big themes, but it goes about it in a very different way. And Joseph Campbell said that ritual is only good ritual if it's boring. Like, it's not a good ritual if it's fun the whole time.
What an interesting thing to say.
Yeah, and the reason is because without boredom, you have no opportunity to sit with yourself and your thoughts and like sort of stew in the experience you're having. If something's too much fun the whole time, you never get that opportunity. And I think that Tree of Life might be my favorite movie, but I don't think it's unfair to say that you could definitely be bored by Tree of Life. There's a new 4-hour cut, which I'm excited to watch someday, but man, I haven't talked myself into it yet because it's not a movie. I was talking about how Lord of the Rings, I said once, is a movie that if it's on, you can sit down, you can watch 10 minutes, you can watch the whole thing, you can watch it for an hour, you can leave, and you've had a very satisfying experience. I don't feel that way about Tree of Life. I feel like you have to consume the whole thing at once so it sits in your heart and you experience it as a whole. And then it's gone and it dissipates and it goes away. And in a way, I think that's a very temple-like experience too.
I don't think I've actually seen this movie before.
Oh, okay.
So tell me about it.
So when Sean Penn got the script, he said, this is maybe the best script I've ever read. And then when Sean Penn saw the movie, he's like, where is what? He could not see in the movie that he thought he was making based on the script. And this movie goes from the dawn of time. It covers the Big Bang. You'll see dinosaurs in this movie, and it goes beyond into an afterlife. But it's also about this family of parents and 2 boys in Texas and just growing up. And it's about how, your everyday mundane life on Earth with your family is just as significant as cosmology and theology. It's just as important as the beginning of time and the afterlife.
Someday we'll fall down and weep, and we'll understand it all. All things. Guide us to the end of time.
Unless you love, your life will flash by.
And it ties all those things together really beautifully, but it doesn't do it in a way that... it's sort of like it connects your dots without any numbers on the dots. And every time you watch that movie, I think you could have a different experience because you'll be connecting the dots in a different way. And to me, I think that's what's great about temple worship is it's open. And that's why, although I really appreciate a lot of the recent changes to the endowment, I'm not 100% sure that I'm 100% in favor of them, because making things a little bit more obvious and simple is valuable, and it makes it easier to access. But there's a lot of value in being bored and lost. And I think that temple worship, it should give us those opportunities, because that's where we can open ourselves up to spiritual experiences and asking questions and receiving personal answers.
I want to challenge you on this.
Go for it.
The idea of boring ritual.
Okay. Well, you go ahead. This Joseph Campbell, blame him. But go ahead. Yeah. I'll defend it. But I also don't totally agree with it. So go ahead.
Well, okay. So I thought it'd be fun to challenge you, not necessarily saying that I disagree.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
And I'm thinking specifically of the rituals that we have in our church. Let's go ahead and list
Sure.
some of them. The most obvious one is the sacrament.
Yes.
Right. It's performed the same way,
Mm-hmm.
and it's regulated.
Yes.
Right. In fact, you're supposed to, after you bless it, look at the bishop to find out if you did it
not
right.
doctrinal, but yes, that is tradition.
It is tradition. Yeah,
Yes.
that's true. Is it not in the handbook?
No, in fact, nowadays you don't even have to get it exactly right. Only serious errors have to be a new prayer.
That is interesting.
So,
Boy, things keep on changing.
yeah.
But it's ritual.
It is ritual.
It's one of the few prayers that is the same
and it's
every
probably
time.
like 10 minutes of, a couple hundred words, probably 100 words maybe between the two prayers, and then absolute silence.
Absolute silence. And,
Isn't that boring? Anyway, go ahead.
It is boring.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's one of them.
Yeah. Okay. Let me comment on something real quick. I want to say, like, boring is, and this is something I tell my students and my children a lot. Boring is a choice, and a lot of times things are only boring because the person who's bored is a boring person, and they're just demanding entertainment and not willing to work for it. Right? I'm not saying I'm not accusing anyone of this. I'm just saying that is one reason why things are boring is because you're kind of boring and you're not willing to like really engage with what's happening. So that's one definition of boring. The other thing about boring, and there's been a lot of articles about this, how kids need to be bored, and like phones are problematic because then nobody's ever bored, and you never get to be without boredom. You can't be creative. You can't like get to know yourself. Like a lot of those things happen in the space of which, if you're the sort of person who rejects boredom, is going to call it boring. So I think that boredom might be a positive thing, but boringness might be a negative reaction to boredom.
Mm-hmm. I have a lot to say about this.
Okay.
So I want to start with aphasia.
What's that?
Okay. Face blindness.
Oh, right. Okay. I thought it was a movie or a game or something. Yes. Aphasia. Gotcha.
Right? But face blindness is this interesting thing where you can't tell one person's face apart from each other.
Right.
Right? There is related topics about whether or not you can visualize something in your head.
Yes, there's a word for that too. It sounds really similar to aphasia.
It does.
Aphantasia.
Yeah. So it's a similar word, aphantasia.
Yes.
So, for example, there's a chart that shows if you imagine an apple in your head, right? If you can see it really well, right? That's one end of the scale. But if you see it really poorly or not at all, that's another end of the scale, right?
It's another spectrum.
So when I visualize an apple, I see it, I can see it, and I can see the color and everything, right? But I've talked to other people who have what I can only describe as a rich inner life, okay? And this was astonishing to me because I never really knew this. And one of them is my own wife. And when she is bored, sitting in a waiting room, right, she can essentially generate a movie in her head, right? And there's plot and there's characters and she sees it and there's a narrative, right? And she'll just watch it play out and she'll imagine, right? And it's like when she started to describe, we've been married 23 years and she only described this to me recently, right? And because we never knew that there was this difference between us, because for me, I can't, I could do that, but it doesn't come naturally at all. And I quickly would lose interest and wander off in my own head. So I listen to podcasts when I'm on a train or when I'm doing chores, right? Because I hate being bored. And I don't have this kind of, this rich inner life thing that I think my wife does. I just don't have it. So I don't know. So anyway, I think some people are different from each other. Some people I think will interact with ritual differently.
I just heard a great show on NPR about this.
Okay.
Which, if I can find it, we'll link to it in the notes. But one of the points is that there's probably different strengths, and so it might make sense as an individual to be sad that you can't visualize to that extent. I can't either. But on the other hand, that causes us. that's the variety of humanity, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so we're going to find different kinds of solutions to a problem than someone with that kind of visual capacity can. Or someone with no visual capacity at all. Like, we're all going to have different... And as a society, it's good for us to have all this variety. We have different inner lives.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I kick back against the rich inner life thing. But it would be cool to be able to visualize like that.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. Okay, so ritual, right? And
Yes.
boredom and being forced to meditate. Now, this is where I think the right way to describe it is.
Okay, let's hear it.
Right?
It's not. I'm not convincing anybody to watch this movie the way I'm talking about it.
Well, it's not boredom in a ritual, right?
Right.
It's this set aside time for meditation that I think
allows your mind to wander or to focus.
Either or. So I remember when I was early in college taking the sacrament and realizing that I wasn't paying attention at all, that I kind of decided that I would reevaluate it. I would try to, from then on, try to take it very seriously and, focus and pray and think about Christ. And it changed kind of how I dealt with the sacrament, right?
Yeah.
So I both like this. To me, boredom really is a negative word.
Well, yeah, and I wish it wasn't. I mean, because boredom... It's a word that has a lot of subjective weight, right? Like, boredom is bad. I don't think anybody is going to, rank boredom high.
Yeah.
But I think it's valuable to talk about it as if it is valuable, not because I'm going to convince anyone that it's good to be bored, but because a lot of the things we associate with boredom are actually positive things that we wish we had more of in our life.
Yeah.
And so when we think about things that are boring us, I think a better way to think about, why is this so boring, is to think, what's the value of this experience I'm having? And the reason I say this is because Tree of Life is not like a movie that most people watch. Like, it is a very different kind of movie, and I love it. Like I said, it might be my favorite movie, but it's a movie that I'm not going to watch unless I have time to sit with it and be all in a way that I don't have to be necessarily with. Even Dark Knight is a really great movie. It's almost as long, but I don't have to. But if I wanted to rewatch that, I wouldn't feel like, oh my gosh, I really got to be 100% present. No, that movie's going to pull me in and force me to pay attention to it. And it's going to be a great experience. But that's not what Tree of Life is offering.
Interesting. So the LDS analogy is ritual.
Ritual, yeah, sort of the ritualistic, just the experience of watching it is very much like a ritual, I would say. And also this connection of the eternal to the mundane, which I think is really beautiful.
That is beautiful. Name a couple more rituals in our church.
Well, a lot of our rituals are pretty short, right? Baptism is maybe 30 seconds.
Yeah, the sealing ordinance is so fast.
Sealing ordinance is really fast. And
our only really long ritual is the endowment.
The endowment is by far the longest that I know of.
What is it down to nowadays?
It is shorter. You can be in and out in well under 2 hours. But, that's a real commitment of time.
Yeah. It is ritualistic.
It is, yeah.
Stand up, sit down, fight, fight, fight.
One that I think is interesting...
Fight. I'm just making a joke.
One thing that I think is interesting that we do, talking about boredom, is fast and testimony meeting, which is just a sacrament meeting, and it has the sacrament, it has the announcements and the business, and then the sacrament, and it has the hymns. So it's like a normal sacrament meeting, but then instead of assigned speakers, we have this open space in which people can speak if they like. Now, across the street from our ward building, the Friends meet, and every Quakers meeting, as I understand it, is like that. You just sit in silence unless someone feels like speaking. But for them, the silence is the main draw. And if you want to say something, you totally can. But for us, in fact, I've been in wards where the silence is super awkward because everybody is ashamed of the silence, as if the silence is somehow a comment on our character. And so everybody wants to jump up and speak if there's silence. But I think that the silence should be a really valuable part of fast and testimony meeting. The moments where it's just quiet and we get to ponder or meditate. And it should not be looked down on or treated as any less valuable than moments where people are witnessing to each other. Maybe
a fun gimmick you could do for one sacrament meeting is to put up a clock. And between every testimony, have a 30-second timer tick down.
Yeah.
So you have to wait until the next one.
Have you seen where, I believe it was a Lifetime Emmy Award that Mr. Rogers received? Have you seen this on YouTube?
I haven't seen this.
I think it was a Lifetime Emmy, but I could be wrong. But anyway, some award he got, and it's full. The building is full with famous people in fancy clothes. And he receives this award, and he talks about people who, blessed his life, and we all have people like that in our life. And he says, I'm going to look at my watch for 1 minute. We're just going to be quiet and think about the people we love. And it has a profound effect on people. Like, people are weeping in the audience, and it's just 1 minute, right? And apparently Mr. Rogers would do this kind of frequently, but he would do it for longer when it wasn't primetime television. 1 minute was about as much as he could get away with. Maybe it was only 30 seconds. I don't remember for sure. But it's powerful, and it's a clip you should look up and watch.
Awesome.
Cool. All right, what's your number 2?
Number 2. Okay. Also animated.
Great.
2000s.
2000s.
Okay.
Also Disney.
Lots of pop culture references in it.
Pop culture references. Shrek.
Not Shrek.
Is it a DreamWorks movie?
It's not DreamWorks. It's
Illumination.
Yeah, it's not Illumination. It's one of these
Sky.
Disney, like Pixar pseudo, but not really kind of Disney animation movies.
That's is it? No, that's from the 90s. I need one more hint. I
Think
guess.
video games.
Oh, but it's somehow Disney adjacent.
Yeah.
Tron?
Nope.
No, that's not animated.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is kind of animated.
Starts with a wreck.
Wreck-It Ralph.
Yeah, that's right.
There we go. That was a Disney movie.
Yeah, I think it was. What on earth could be LDS about Wreck-It Ralph? And I'm going to tell you, it's one of the most LDS movies.
I believe it. In fact, I think I've read analysis saying that before.
Mm-hmm.
So I should be upfront. I have seen this movie, but our second son had a total meltdown in it. And so I watched most of the movie from the side of the theater, like on the little hallway that leads out.
It's okay. The first part of the movie is all we need to really talk about.
And I don't remember the movie well at all.
Mm-hmm. What about the second movie?
I've seen the last half hour of the second movie in a fast food restaurant on the side of the 5.
This doesn't really count.
Yeah. I think the sound was off.
So I'll just ask you then, what do you think the LDS theme is in Wreck-It Ralph?
So Ralph is dissatisfied with his lot, and he wants to be something more. He wants to be a hero instead of a villain, right?
That is true.
And everybody says that the rules of the world are that can't be, and yet he insists on it. And I assume he succeeds in some way of
he does
excelling into becoming something else.
Yeah, it's really good. This rejection of character, this rejection of what's the word? What the world tells you are,
mm-hmm.
and being something else. But this isn't the part that I'm talking about. I want to go all the way back to the beginning of the movie. One of the most famous sequences of it is when it's the opener.
Okay.
When Wreck-It Ralph is sitting there with a bunch of other people.
Oh, it's like, hi, I'm Ralph, I'm a villain or something?
Yes.
Or it's a villain support group?
Yes.
That's the beginning of the movie?
Very first
really?
scene.
Wow, okay.
Man. Sure must be nice being the good guy.
Nice share, Ralph. As fellow bad guys, we've all felt what you're feeling, and we've come to terms with it.
Really?
Right here. I'm Zangief. I'm bad guy.
Hi, Zangief.
That was in the trailer, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah. Wreck-It Ralph and Wreck-It Ralph 2, in my opinion, is about therapy.
Okay.
From start to finish for both of the movies.
Okay.
Right? Wreck-It Ralph doesn't do it on his own. And has a tight and constant support group of people that care about him and are trying to help him. Okay? And specifically generated as kind of a found group, right? Which is this collection of bad guys.
Okay.
Like Zangief. Squish head just like swallow's egg is what he says.
Between my thighs.
Okay, anyway. This my reading of Wreck-It Ralph is that when Wreck-It Ralph goes to therapy, right, to try and figure out how to change, right, it is an example of the power of therapy. So why is this particularly LDS?
Well, that's what I'm wondering.
Well, this comes back to me being a clerk.
Okay.
And as a clerk, I wrote the checks that I know. So I wrote the checks to cover the therapy of the people in the ward.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The LDS Church pays for therapy. Professional. All right?
Yeah.
Not bishop interview counseling,
mm-hmm.
right? Which is valuable, right? But actual, I can't afford it because therapy's too expensive, or I want someone who has an LDS spin, or I just need to talk about stuff, marriage counseling, family counseling.
Yeah.
Right? This is actually a huge part of our expenditures on a monthly basis from a ward. Mm-hmm. Right? A lot of your fast and testimony dollars that you commit will end up going to therapy sessions.
Is that still particularly LDS?
To me, it is.
Okay.
All right, and this is I'm hopefully growing in the LDS theming here, right? But to me, it is, and I concede that it might not seem LDS to many other LDS people.
Is there anything about?
But I want it to be more mainstream LDS.
Gotcha.
And so that's why I wanted to bring it up here.
Is there anything about the way that therapy works in Wreck-It Ralph that strikes you as a particularly Mormon vibe?
Yeah. So this one I think maybe would come from the second movie more.
Okay.
So in the second movie, the finale of the movie, which you may have seen since you saw it at a gas station. I saw the finale.
Yeah, right? I did. Without sound, but it sounds great.
There is a big demonish monster made of small Wreck-It Ralphs, tromping through this big city. Okay. Right? And that monster is, generated from fears inside Ralph, if I remember right. Okay. And a few of the main characters, right before the finale, are sitting together in a room kind of watching what's happening. I mean, it goes off the rails. The movie kind of goes crazy. Okay. All right, let's be real. And they're talking about it, and they're like, what are we going to do? And one of the guys says, okay, well, we have two options here, right? Mm-hmm. One of which is fire a rocket at it. Okay. Okay? And the other is try to work out what the underlying fundamental problems are and figure out a way to resolve those concerns. Okay.
Either you put all the clones in therapy, not very realistic.
Right, we're just going to go with the rocket. So they fire the rocket at the monster, and it totally doesn't work. And so during the rest of the finale, they talk through all of the issues with the monster as they're kind of trying to redirect it and calm it down, and eventually that is the long and hard solution. Yeah. Right, is the one that eventually works. Right, the talking it out, the working it through, the kind and thoughtful care, right, is really what makes it through. And this may be more of and in my lived experience, with the podcast, with the Berkeley Ward, right, with issues that are hard to understand, but find working through it is particularly useful. And so, yeah, this is what I mean. How both movies are about therapy. Okay. And I think it's and if you don't think it's LDS, or not you, but you in the audience, you dear listener who thinks that this is kind of a strange take, right? You never thought of a therapy as particularly LDS. I would challenge that and say that it is, right? And there's something fundamental to the bishop as a therapist, right? That stems from the whole confessional part of being a member of the church, right? Yeah. Right? We don't have confessionals like our friends the Catholics do, but we do have, the idea of talking with the bishop about your problems in your past. That's a very LDS part of our doctrine, right? Yeah. And so it's kind of baked into our theology in many ways. And our bishops, of course, are not professional counselors. That's why I'm emphasizing this professional service that exists out there. But they can direct you to professional counselors, and they can help you get started down a road.
Also, we sort of fundamentally, as an article of faith, accept that no one is fully lost. You can always be healed. You can always go back to growing. Yeah. You can always become more than what you are. You're not stuck with whatever you feel like you are at the moment.
So, full disclosure, this insight came to me from one of my kids, who we walked out of Wreck-It Ralph 2, kind of me and my family. I think my folks were with me, and they were like, we were all like, that was a weird movie. And my kid just looked at us and said, that movie was about therapy. And we were like, oh. And so I've been thinking about that ever since.
That's been a few years. I forget when that came out.
Yeah. So there you go. That's my number 2. What'd you think?
I'll allow it.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not totally persuaded that it's LDS, but I am persuaded that as a culture, we should be more open to therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that as someone who has definitely inherited the strong Western manly mindset of I don't need therapy.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I totally get that.
Yes.
As Taylor Tomlinson said, there's a lot of us middle-aged white folks just white-knuckling it through our lives.
Yeah. I think that's probably true. Although I think Gen Z is breaking that in a pretty big way.
I hope so. I think I agree. All right. Well, maybe not as compelling, but
yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, complain. Come to our Discord server and complain.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so I don't usually listen to podcasts while I'm on a plane, or a train in this case. I was on a train last Thursday for 12 hours, and I wanted to get some work done. I didn't.
It's a long time, by the way.
It was a long time. But I did watch 3 movies as part of that. I watched The Inventor, which is an animated movie that came out last year, and has really cool animation, and isn't quite sure what it's about, but it's still a fun movie. I liked it. I watched that with my daughter, and then I dropped her off, and then I got back on the train to come home. And I watched RoboCop, which I've never seen before. And
this doesn't sound like it's for a particular purpose.
No, these are just movies that I just sort of... And then the last one I watched was a train movie, so it made it appropriate. It was the Shanghai Express from, I think, 1931.
Oh, okay.
And Shanghai Express. I'm going to guess you have not seen it?
Not the 1931, but is this at all related to, like, the Hercules Poirot?
No, the Murder on the Orient Express. It's not connected to that.
Okay.
It predates the novel those are based on.
Okay. That makes sense, because that's like an Agatha Christie novel.
Yeah.
Or something.
And I'm pretty sure she hadn't written that one by 1931, though I could be wrong. So anyway, it's a great movie. Like it's darn near a masterpiece. Like it's a classic and it's a well-admired movie, but just a few small changes, and I think this would be one of the great movies we talk about the same way we talk about like Casablanca. It's really good. I highly recommend it, and it's a good train movie because it mostly takes place on a train. But oh, by the way, just a reminder, we're going to be spoiling some things. So on the Shanghai Express, the reason I checked it out is because I'd been reading a lot about Anna May Wong, and I'd never seen one of her movies. She's a Chinese-American actress who won an early Hollywood star at a time where most Asian roles were played by people in yellowface. Anyway, she was in it, and I was under the impression she was a major character, but she's not. She's a mid-level character. But she and Marlene... It's not Marlene. I just learned it's Marlena, I think. Anyway, it's 3 syllables. I'm going to say Marlena. I think that's right. I learned that from an episode of Burns and Allen. But Marlena Dietrich, the great movie star of the era with the famous arched eyebrows. And anyway, they play prostitutes. And they're high-end prostitutes. And they get on this train, and they're headed to Shanghai. It's on the Shanghai Express. And other characters got on the train. There's a bunch of characters on the train, and they're all going to Shanghai for various reasons. And it's the middle of there's a revolution going on in China. There's, a threat of war. There's violence. There's kidnappings. The train gets stopped by revolutionaries at one point. Anyway, on the train, unbeknownst to either of them before it happens, I'm going to say Marlene because I'm so used to calling her Marlene. I'm going to try to say Marlena, but if I say Marlene, I'm not going to correct myself. Marlena... Her old boyfriend, whose name I can't remember, and I don't remember the name of the actor who plays her either. Actually, let me just find out.
Clive Brooke, Donald Harvey.
Clive Brooke plays. I'll call him Clive. So Clive and her had a falling apart, and that's why she went into prostitution. So they were engaged. They were all set to get married, and then she wanted to. And normally in movies where characters do this, like I'm really angry, but she recognizes that this was a terrible thing to do and really not the right thing to do. But to test his love of her, she made him think that she was with another man, and he wasn't okay with it, and he left her. And then she was alone in China and went into prostitution. And I think 5 years have passed, and she's now known as Shanghai Lily. And there's the famous line where she tells him like,
"How have I changed?"
I wish I could describe it.
Well, Doc, I've changed my name.
Married?
No. took more than one man to change my name to Shanghai Lily.
So at this point, she has been, quote, cheating on him, unquote, right? She's a sex worker. She's a high-end prostitute. And they bump into each other again. And they both still love each other. They're not over each other. But, he's a respectable British officer, and she's a prostitute. So this is not going to work out. And the part of the movie that I want to share with you is this conversation about faith that she has with the Reverend Mr. Carmichael, who is one of the characters I think needs to be tweaked for this movie to be a true masterpiece. But their conversation is really powerful. And her former fiance has been kidnapped by the revolutionaries, and he's being held for ransom. Essentially, what the revolutionaries want is for their number 2 guy to be released. And then they'll release this British officer. But it's not because he's a British officer or because he has money. It's because he's being sent to Shanghai to operate on the head of the British whatever in China at that time with a life-saving operation. Like, he's going to save that guy's life. So they kidnap him, and all they want is for their guy to be released. So it all seems to be going well, but then Shanghai Lily discovers that they're going to kill him. They're going to send him back as they promised, but they're going to blind him. They're going to blind him. So they'll send him back alive like they promised, but he won't be able to do the operation. And she wants to save him, and she spends the whole night praying. And Reverend Mr. Carmichael, who had been really, really upset there were prostitutes on the train the whole time, says, he comes around on her. She prays the whole night. And then the next thing he hears that she's agreed to go off and be the revolutionary leader's concubine. And that she's just going to leave them all on the train. And what nobody knows is that she's swapped herself to save her fiance's life, or his eyes, and have him put back on the train unharmed. Like, she's made that deal with the leader of the revolutionaries. But she doesn't want to tell anybody that, because just like when she tested her fiance before, she wants him to believe in her and have faith in her. And so Mr. Carmichael says, no, he has to know that you're doing it for him. Like, he has to know so that he doesn't hate you, because he's very upset. I'm giving way too much exposition. I apologize. So Shanghai Lily says, it may seem odd for me to use your language, but it's purely a question of faith. Why you cannot tell him. You see, once upon a time, we loved each other. We parted, and I threw my life away because I didn't care to bargain for love with words. I haven't changed since then, and neither has he. The Reverend says, you're still in love with him, aren't you? Yes. Is he still in love with you? I doubt it. And the Reverend says, you're right. Love without faith, like religion without faith, doesn't amount to very much. I don't suppose I can help you. And the arc of the story is the guy realizing that he loves her, and really it doesn't matter what she spent the last 5 years doing. It doesn't matter the reason that she agreed to go off with this guy. If he loves her, then that should be enough. And so love conquers all. It's a romantic, happy ending, but it's done with this depth, and usually when somebody does something bad to see if somebody really loves them, it's really manipulative and cheap and bad. And she recognizes that she never should have done that. That was a terrible thing to do. But now she does a great good, and she doesn't want him to love her because she was willing to trade herself for his safety. She just wants him to love her because he loves her, and that love matters. And I thought it was a really interesting look at faith and a really interesting look at love and how those two things combine. And I think both relationships we have with other people and also our relationship with God, like faith and love are really closely tied. Like, when you love someone, you have faith in them. And if you have faith in someone, you will have love in them. And those concepts aren't really separable.
Interesting. Often here in our church, we don't really talk about relationship, love, and faith in the same sentence.
Unless it's faith, love, and charity.
Faith, love, and charity. Faith in someone else.
Yeah, or faith, hope, and charity. Excuse me, faith, hope, and charity. But they're connected. There's something about those concepts which are inextricably tied, I would argue. And I think with a Latter-day Saint focus on eternity and our understanding that while we're in mortality, we can't see eternity clearly, and you have to take a lot of things on faith. I just thought that the relationship where he thought she was terrible, but he loved her, and she was willing to let him think she was terrible because she didn't want him to love her because he saved her, but because of who they are and their relationship has value on its own. It was really great.
Well, that sounds really cool. I can totally buy it. Why that would have a religious vibe to it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily uniquely LDS as
Not
well?
necessarily, no. I didn't bring it for that reason. Just I just thought it was really insightful, and I just watched it. And
you got to be able to watch it for free somewhere, right?
I got it from the library. I think it isn't actually available for free anywhere right now. Which, in my opinion, any movie as old as 1931
1931.
The copyright in this country. It should be available to everyone whenever they want.
Okay, good. Boy, this has turned out to be a lot of fun. Let's talk about my third one. Coco.
So this one too. I did actually watch the whole thing, but Lindsay had to leave because our youngest child melted down. So I've been every November 1st we say we're going to rewatch it, and we haven't done it yet.
Well, I've seen it once, and I was fine. Mm-hmm. So in our family, what I mean by that when I say I was fine,
you didn't weep.
It's not necessarily what that means. It made me a bit misty. I found that after I had kids, that movies made me misty.
I weep at anything.
Like in a way that certainly didn't happen before I had kids. Mm-hmm. And the first time I noticed it was Finding Nemo. Mm. Okay, in Finding Nemo, in the very finale of that show, all the fish are yelling, swim down. Yeah. Right? And Nemo is in the lead, leading them down, right? Yeah. And then the net breaks, all the fish plummet to the ocean floor, and it looks like Nemo has been crushed. And Marlin scoops him up, and it flashes back to the egg. Yeah. Like, how you doing right now?
Oh, man.
He has this flashback with him as an egg, right? Yeah. And all of a sudden, I was like, what is happening to me? Yeah. This is too much like my own little kid. I can't take it. So Coco, of course, is famous for it being an immensely emotional movie, right? With the critical song, Remember Me. And it's remembrance that I want to focus on as the LDS theme for this movie. I think that remembrance isn't necessarily uniquely LDS, right? But the idea of being connected to your ancestors, right, in a deep religious way, right, is very much an LDS idea. And one that I don't necessarily think is in mainstream Christianity as much. Do you think I'm wrong?
Doctrinally, it's not, but I do think.
And people are connected to their ancestors.
I think people.
I don't want to overstate it.
I think people. I mean, people tend to talk about grandma as their guardian angel, right? But in most Christian theology, angels aren't people. That's a Mormon idea.
Yeah, that's true. That is an interesting Mormon idea. That's 100%.
That could be a fun episode too.
Yeah, angels are people.
Can I just plug something real fast?
Okay, sure.
I'll get in our plug real fast for being a member of the Dialogue Podcast family. Yep. Another member of the family, Angels and Seer Stones, which does folklore. Maybe I've mentioned here before, but anyway, I love it. They did one recently about angels, and they talked about this, how they're both BYU professors, and how their LDS students are always shocked to learn that other Christians don't believe that angels are people. And anyway, I love that podcast. I've listened to every episode, Aaron. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts.
Okay.
And so I would recommend that to everybody. Anyway, back to you.
Let's talk about remembrance.
Okay.
So it's, of course, the central theme of Coco, in that people vanish when they're no longer remembered, right? And the idea of the main guitarist having been excised from the family, right? Yeah. And how serious of a problem that was, right? And then you see people fade away in the movie, and it's really, really intense. And so Miguel, wait, what happened? After watching Chicaron.
Which one's Chicaron?
With one of the guys that disappears.
Oh, okay. Oh, he sees someone disappear.
Yep. Wait, what happened?
He's been forgotten. When there's no one left in the living world who remembers you, you disappear from this world. We call it the final death.
Where did he go?
No one knows.
But I've met him. I could remember him when I go back.
No, it doesn't work like that, chamaco. Our memories, they have to be passed down by those who knew us in life, in the stories they tell about us. But there's no one left alive to pass down Chicha's stories. Hey, it happens to everyone eventually. Come on, De La Cruzito. You've got a contest to win.
Right?
Yeah.
And this kind of emotional sadness, right? Which is so strongly, it's so strongly both a part of our religion and rejected by our religion, is what I think it is so interesting in terms of like an LDS theme. So how is it accepted by our religion? We strive so hard to find our ancestors because we want to be saviors on Mount Zion for them. We want to bring them back into the celestial kingdom through baptism for the dead and through the endowment for the dead and sealings for the dead, right? And so because of this, we get involved in family history, we do the work, and we find them. It's rejected by us, okay, because of the concept of we will find everybody eventually.
Yeah.
But even those who have been forgotten,
And there's
right?
no record.
And that there's no record, who were, who lived and died and are buried with the same last name. And so nobody in the records just got written down as the same person, but it's really two different people.
Yeah.
Right? And we only have a photograph of one of them. That all of that stuff will eventually be corrected, and we'll find everybody, and everybody will have a chance. Right?
Yeah.
And so what Coco does for us is it both reminds us of of what we have to do to remember those who came before us, right? But also it makes us LDS folks happy that we don't believe that that's the way it's going to go. that we will be able to find those who have been forgotten. So that's my pitch for Coco as
that's good.
As LDS themes.
I really liked it, and I barely remember it. And every year I say I'm going to watch it. But the problem is, I want to watch it on the Day of the Dead. Yeah. And then that always ends up being a bad day.
Yeah.
And so I just need to give myself permission to watch it within a week or so of Day of the Dead so I don't miss it. I got to watch it this year.
Okay. Well, I think I'm being motivated to watch some movies. Maybe this will.
Yeah, this should get me going. I hope so.
I have an unrelated but kind of related bit of trivia.
Oh, okay.
You ever see James Bond movie Spectre, I think it's called?
No, I did not see that one.
It has a Day in the Dead parade in it. Big old floats and everything like that. And when you see it, I'm stealing this from QI, the trivia show I like to quote sometimes.
Better than QAnon.
If you see it, true. If you see this scene, you would think that this had been an ancient tradition, right? Mm-hmm. It wasn't. They totally created it for the movie. It had never happened before. Right? And the people in that city were like, that was great. And so they've just done it again every year.
Oh, yeah.
It instantly became a tradition, a Day of the Dead parade.
That's awesome. Traditions can show up for any reason.
All right. Last one to you, if you have one.
Yes, I do. So this is my animated movie.
Okay.
This is The Tale of the Princess Kaguya.
That sounds like an anime.
Yes, it is. It's Studio Ghibli. Or Studio Ghibli. Mm-hmm. I've been saying Ghibli all my life, but some people say Ghibli, and I have not looked up which is correct.
Well, why look up anything?
Who cares? Anyway, it's directed by Isao Takahata, who is one of the co-founders of the studio, who is not Miyazaki.
Okay.
But he's most famous, at least in our country, probably for Grave of the Fireflies, which I've not seen, but it's a famously depressing movie and not one to watch unless you want to cry for 3 days.
Uh-huh.
And maybe Pompoko. I've seen Pompoko. I've also seen My Neighbors the Yamadas. And then this is his last movie, The Tale of the Princess Kaguya. It is based on a traditional Japanese folktale, The Tale of the Bamboo Cutter, possibly the oldest Japanese folktale which still exists. And there are similar stories in the European tradition, like Thumbelina is kind of a similar story. So in this story, it's not an identical story, but in this story, there's a bamboo cutter. He finds a baby, like a little tiny person inside the stalk of bamboo, who becomes a baby, who grows up rapidly and becomes an adult within a matter of months or years. Like any old story, there's going to be different versions.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what a beautiful little doll.
No, quiet. You'll wake her. She's sleeping. She just appeared to me in the grove.
Appeared?
Definitely a blessing from heaven. Hey, heaven gave her to me.
Oh, well, I'm the one who'll raise her.
Raise her? She's already a perfect little princess.
No, don't be silly. There's more to raising a child than you think. Right?
And the different bamboo stalks also provide money and clothes, and the bamboo cutter interprets this as like, we're supposed to make her a princess. So they go to the big city, they get her training, she learns how to be a princess. That's the story. And then, of course, rich men try to persuade her to marry them. They promise great gifts, but they're not great guys. They're all liars and cheaters and so forth. Anyway, all she really wants is just to live her life, and she liked growing up in the country, and she misses that. Anyway, it ends up that she is a child of the moon, like she's from the moon.
Ooh.
And she chose to come to Earth because she wanted to experience mortality. And she wanted to live a mortal life. And while she was there, she formed these connections, and she loves her parents, but eventually she has to go back. Now, when she goes back, when they put the robes on her, the robes of the moon people, she will forget everything about this life.
Oh.
And so her return to paradise results in a wiping of her memory of mortality. But the reason she wanted to come is because she saw this other woman who had been to Earth and saw her looking at the Earth and crying. Although she didn't remember why she'd been there, Kaguya could tell that there was something valuable about going to Earth, which is why she wanted to come for herself. So you come to Earth and you learn things, and you form relationships, and you become a fuller version of yourself, and then you return to live with God. That's very Mormon. The difference, of course, is that transition from this life to the next, in which you forget everything. So this is from the Wikipedia article for the Tale of the Bamboo Cutter. That summer, whenever Kaguya Hime views the full moon, her eyes fill with tears because she knows she's just missing the moon. Though her adoptive parents grow very worried and question her, she refuses to tell them what is wrong. Her behavior becomes increasingly erratic until she reveals that she is not of the Earth and that she must return to the people on the moon. It is said that she was sent to the Earth where she would inevitably form material attachment as a punishment for some crime without further description. That's not in the movie. But in this version of the folktale, she was sent to Earth because she was punished. Not because she wanted to come to gain experience, but she was sent as a punishment because she'd done something wrong. And so when she returns... it's somewhere in the article. But when she returns, and the loss of her memory and everything is because she's going to finally learn to achieve this great Buddhist ideal of separating yourself from material concerns, which includes your parents, which includes the relationships, which includes the knowledge you've learned, separating yourself from everything. Returning to the moon is leaving all that behind. That's the traditional way to understand the story. But I don't think that's what the movie is saying. I think the movie has a much more LDS take in that coming to Earth, even though like she's going to forget much of what happened to her, she's grown because of that. And she's more full because of the relationship she had, and that those things will linger and continue, even though she's of the moon and they're of the Earth, and so there's this like permanent separation that happens. There's plenty of differences. This is not an LDS story at all, but the way the story is told, it feels like the purpose of this life is to come, to get a body, to learn, to grow, to form relationships, to become a better person, and then you get to return to live with the God of heaven.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. And the veil is just in a slightly different place for us.
Yeah, right. I mean, in the movie, she also forgot before she came to Earth. She doesn't remember until
she gets
she's
double
older.
veil.
Yeah, she gets double veiled. Later on, she remembers, but yeah, she gets veiled at the beginning of both journeys.
Well, that sounds fantastic. I've seen several
really
Studio
movie.
Ghibli movies, but I have missed this one.
Yeah, I there are some that are very strange, and there are some that I don't love, but I've never seen a bad one. And I really like this movie a lot.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Our LDS take on mortality of
Are you saying R-O-U-R with a Western pronunciation, or are you saying RLDS like the reorganized church?
O-U-R.
Okay, just because I totally heard RLDS and was like, I didn't know you would know this, but anyway, they're called the Community of Christ now, Aaron. So, anyway,
of course.
Sorry, RLDS take, please. Sorry for interrupting.
Well, I'm just saying that it's one of my favorite parts of our religion is this focused plan, this ideal of life before and after, that I love to see it represented here in this story. And it is one of the most, it is a surprising doctrine when you teach it to someone who's not a member of our faith. I specifically remember telling somebody, it's just sitting down with the fourth discussion and saying, with the opening line, like I'd said a bunch of times before, we lived before we came here. And the guy was like, what? And it's just, it's great. I love it. 6 movies.
6 movies.
More if you look at some of the other ones that we talked about.
Yeah, and we would really love to hear movies that you think belong
in this category.
In this conversation. Yeah. So hit either of us up on Twitter.
One of the fun things I went through as I was prepared for this was because I wanted to try to find uniquely LDS things, was trying to find the dividing lines in our church, right, that separate us from other religions, right?
Yes.
And it's not as many as you might think, but there are quite a few.
It's more the recipe than the ingredients.
Yeah, there you go. Our link to our Discord is in the show notes.
Yeah, please join us.
Go follow other dialogue podcasts. We'd like to thank our person who made our music for us, Daniel Foster Smith. And this is the end of season 6. We're going to start season 7 sometime in the fall.
Yep.
And we have some ideas about where we're going to go. We want to kind of return to Mormon history. We have at least one book that we're going to look at. We might look at more.
Yeah, the first episode, tentatively, we're planning to talk about the introduction and first chapter of Ben Park's American Zion.
American Zion.
So if you want to talk about the beginning of that book with us, grab a copy.
And we'll see how that takes us throughout the year. But I imagine we'll end up returning to that book several times.
Yes. Yeah. How frequently and how thoroughly is TBD, but we're big Ben Park fans.
Yeah, we didn't cover every chapter of David O. McKay, for example.
That's true.
I doubt we'd do the same here. But I'm particularly interested in reading his take on the 2012 Mormon moment, which is part of that book, because it's organized in chapters based on kind of eras in LDS.
I think it's
history.
Each chapter's a decade.
A decade, okay.
Yes.
And
from 1830 to 2020, I want to say.
Yeah, and already I'm learning things about Lucy Mack Smith that and Joseph Smith Sr. that I didn't know.
All right,
just already
that's a good sign.
in the first chapter. Okay, let's wrap it up.
Yeah, we're done.
All right, thanks, Eric.
See you. All right.
Bye.
Bye.